positive because it may be too early on in the disease. And so if you think it's lepto, treat for lepto, and you really need to follow up with additional tests, even if that initial test was negative. She also talked about there are such a thing as subclinical shedders, so animals that are chronically infected with leptospirosis don't show signs of disease, but shed it in their urine, but that has not been seen in the United States. So again, because I think this is extremely important for veterinarians and for people, diagnosis of leptospirosis should be based on clinical signs, primarily. Okay, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, call it a duck. So if they have kidney failure, liver failure, reluctance to move, abdominal pain, mild peripheral lymph node enlargement, right, so swollen glands, fast breathing, high white cell count, low platelets, normal potassium, elevated CK, which is a muscle enzyme. They're losing protein in their urine, and sometimes they even have glucose in their urine, and they may have signs of pancreatitis. Think lepto, because they will feel much, much better within 48 hours of antibiotics. And I think it's like within 72 hours they're no longer considered contagious as far as shedding it in their urine. Other less common things we can see associated with leptospirosis is muscle inflammation, inflammation in the eye. You can actually have hemorrhaging in the retina. And they've documented this thing called respiratory distress syndrome, which is basically massive pulmonary hemorrhage. So tons of bleeding, bruising in the lungs with or without kidney failure. So leptospirosis can cause some weird stuff, and it's pretty scary. And that was my primary takeaway. That, and if I go to Hawaii, I really don't know if I want to play in the water. So I'm going to hand it over to the lecturer herself to tell you what she thought the most important takeaway was.
My name is Jane Sykes. I'm a professor at UC Davis, and the most important part of my lecture was vaccinating dogs for lepto because it's a preventable disease.
And one more thing that is a bonus about these large conferences is, well, there's things like you can see friends that you haven't seen in a while or people that you graduated with and you can touch base with them. But to be honest, if you're there just to like get your CE done, right, so I'm going for a day, there's not a lot of schmoozing time. They usually give you an hour or so in between where there's no lectures, and that hour is meant to encourage you to A, have lunch, and B, go to the exhibit hall. So the exhibit hall is frequently everyone's favorite part because we get free stuff. So the exhibit hall is one of the large portions of the convention center where probably at this one, because it's so big, there's hundreds of booths, and at each booth is a different company, and they are promoting their products or their services. And so you can talk to people if you want. Everybody wants to usually scan your name badge because they have these like weird little things that almost look like scanners at a department store, but it scans the information on your badge so that then they can email you and try and sell you things later as well. So their goal is to make connections and sell product. Our goal sometimes is to find product, but mostly it's to get free pens and sometimes free stuffed animals for your kids or free little tchotchkes. Like a lot of times they'll have pop sockets or they'll have little kitschy things, like they had one of those holders that dispenses poop bags that looks like a dog and you pull it out of the back end, so it's like, you're pulling it out of the bum. So realistically, part of most veterinarians' jobs when they go to a continuing education conference is to ensure that they get enough free pens to distribute equally among their employees so no one is upset. Because everyone expects you to come back with weird random stress balls and bottle openers and all sorts of things. So you always got to get the free stuff. I myself am fairly awkward about getting the free stuff just because I feel bad like just jutting in and then stealing it, but there is a technique. So if you wait until the sales rep is distracted talking to another veterinarian, you can just like kind of reach in, grab some free stuff and walk away. And that sounds terrible, and a lot of times I do talk to them. However, I'm not above admitting that I do frequently steal free stuff. Well, not steal, because it's free, right? So I take my share of free stuff. A friend of mine is extremely good at getting free stuff, and so she reminds me of that TV show where it's like the shoppers have 10 minutes or whatever to go into the grocery store and get as much as they can, And I'll come back with like 2 pens, and she'll come back with like an armful of stuff and like things that you didn't even know existed. So I do think there is an art to it, which I have not totally honed. But I'm practicing, so we'll see how I do today, and I will let you guys know.
I had these grand aspirations for recording while I was in the exhibit hall, and I tried to talk to some of the people that had exhibit booths, but there was a lot of concern about me recording employees and the companies not approving it, and I didn't want anyone to get into legal trouble, so I didn't really record while I was in the exhibit hall. They did have some pretty cool stuff. I met a lot of interesting people from a lot of different companies. I also got a lot of really good free stuff for my staff, which was obviously the most important part. And then I interviewed my dear friend, Dr. Alexandra Stocks, who works at Town and Country Animal Hospital in Virginia. And she is the one I mentioned who is amazing at getting all the free stuff. She's just like a savant when it comes to exhibit hall walking and obtaining free things. Like, she just looks like a bag lady by the time she leaves. So she wanted me to go to this one lecture with her, which I wasn't super excited about, but I went just to be a good friend. But the payback for it was she had to record a little blip for my podcast. So we're going to end our adventure of continuing education, which I hope everybody learned something, with my brief, not even really an interview, but forced recording from Dr. Stocks. And I apologize for the background noise. We were on an escalator and then trying to walk really fast to the next lecture when I recorded it. So if we sound out of breath, it's because we were working hard to get our education.
My name is Alexandra Stocks, and what am I asking, or what am I answering again?
So what you look for at a CE?
When I am attending CE, I am looking for the best value I can, since my CE is limited. I look for practical lectures with real-world applications. I look for as much free stuff as I possibly can get.
This is the one I mentioned earlier who gets all the good free stuff. I hope that was a good illustration of what the AVMA convention for 2019 was like, as well as the thrill of the free stuff from the exhibit hall. And now we're going to turn our attention to Badger and Dallas for our pet tales this podcast.
I had a 6-year-old Labrador who had injured his knee. He had partially stretched a cruciate ligament, and the doctor's recommendation was cage rest and no activity. And so he was at home with us, walking on a leash, and he was not improving. And I would go to work, he'd be asleep on the sofa, and I would come home, and there he is, asleep on the sofa, still limping, no improvement at all, out on the leash. And finally, we got a nanny cam and put it up to see if he was doing something when we were at work. And as it turned out, he was actually waiting until my car left the driveway, getting his tennis ball, going upstairs, and dropping it down 2 flights of stairs and chasing it. And then getting it and walking back up the stairs and dropping it down the stairs and chasing it. So this is why his leg was not healing, because he was playing retrieve all day while I was at work. Aww. But when I would come home, he'd be exhausted on the sofa where I left him in the morning.
Well, he's very ingenious as far as entertaining himself.
Yes. And he knew he would get in trouble and be put in a crate if he did it when I was there. He never did it when we were there. He only did it when we left.
Dallas was a 90-pound English Labrador. He was black. We would walk down the road and people would cross the street because his cataracts were so bad it looked like he had white marbles instead of eyeballs. He also had PRA, so he saw nothing. I'd have to tell him how to stop so I didn't run into stuff, and how to turn left and go around things. I had words for getting up on top of things and words for getting off of things. But he was also a therapy dog with pet partners. Mm-hmm. And his favorite place to go was the blind and autistic school, where he got to pull a wagon. And he would tote the kids around. So when we'd go up and down the halls in this wagon with the little blind or the autistic kids in the wagon.
That's
so we had
cool.
The blind leading the blind. It was awesome. He would play ball even though he couldn't see. He just, used his nose. He was a good dog.
So would you tell him left, right when he was pulling?
You tell him left, right, easy, if he's going to run into something, stop, come, turn around, back up. He's a good boy.
I think that about wraps it up. As always, thank you for listening to this installment of Vetsplaining. I hope you enjoyed your time with me and ideally learned at least one new thing for the day. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to leave a comment below or email info@independenthillvet.com and put podcast topic or podcast comment in the subject line. Until next time.